Transmigrated as a disabled protagonist, how should I continue the script? Chapter 14, Heading to the Detective Agency. In the streets of Yokohama, beneath an old four-story office building. A boy in a white shirt opened the car door, pulling out another boy of the same age who carried a cold, indifferent demeanor. The second boy exuded an odd, puppet-like presence, dressed in shabby, plain clothes, and stood half a head taller than the first. The boy in the white shirt glanced up at the fourth floor of the office building, his face revealing no clear emotions. One Edogawa Ranpo was enough to make him fully focus. The driver, after collecting the fare, saw that they were heading into the office building and, being well informed, asked, "Young gentleman, are you heading to the armed detective agency?" The boy in the white shirt turned around, suddenly showing a lively expression. "Yes, I heard that they take on all kinds of private requests that can't be handled through public channels. Do you happen to know any inside information about them?" The driver didn't notice the change in his expression and kindly said, "Their president and members are good people. They've solved many dangerous and troublesome issues. If you have something difficult to handle, you can't go wrong asking them for help. However, there are many skilled individuals inside, so they might not take on very ordinary requests. For instance, if someone were looking for a lost cat or dog, the armed detective agency wouldn't even bother with that kind of request." With the networking skills that come with being a taxi driver, the man had, in fact, given rides to some of the agency's members before. "Too ordinary, huh?" The boy in the white shirt lifted the corner of his mouth and looked up towards the fourth floor. There, Edogawa Ranpo leaned against the window, his detective hat nearly falling off, peering at the two through his glasses. In the next second, he flashed a smile of interest and, making a megaphone gesture with his hands, shouted, "Hurry up and come on in." That's why Tezuka Osamu wasn't too accustomed to interacting with people who were both simple and enthusiastic. And now there was another one to add to the list. Not to mention, someone with an incredible ability to see through things. Wearing a white shirt and black trousers, Tezuka Osamu gave up trying to figure out how much Ranpo had seen through him. Instead, he held Yakimaru's hand and looked in the direction of the fourth floor window. The wall blocked Yakimaru's vision, but he could see Edogawa Ranpo clear and pure life flame ahead, someone just like Dororo. A pure white flame. Is this the same person we met before? The height and size of the life flame are somewhat similar. For someone he had only met once, it wasn't easy for Yakimaru to distinguish them clearly. Even his vision wasn't omnipotent. Fortunately, the entire street was filled with gray-white flames, and the pure white ones were very rare, naturally drawing Yakimaru's attention. White represented someone who hadn't experienced true evil or whose soul hadn't fallen into corruption. Besides, he wouldn't forget someone he met just yesterday to the point of complete oblivion. "Not nervous?" Tezuka Osamu asked him softly, clearly noticing that as they entered the bustling area, the early morning streets, with people and cars passing by, made Yakimaru feel uneasy. He had to rely on the taxi to calm himself enough to continue. This scene gave Tezuka Osamu a deeper understanding of Yakimaru's mental state. Yakimaru was accustomed to distancing himself from crowds. Having been solitary for so long, even his formidable combat abilities couldn't make him feel safe among people. Tezuka Osamu saw this boring world with remarkable clarity. It was precisely because he understood the fickleness of humanity that he had lost trust in others. After all those years, he had finally encountered someone as simple and easy to understand as Yakimaru. "Let's head up. Maybe we'll meet a few more interesting people." After making this decision, Tezuka Osamu led the way, guiding the solitary Yakimaru, who wandered in the darkness, up the stairs. Yakimaru no longer found the second pure white life flame interesting. He only kept his focus on Dororo. If this was a journey, then let this journey last a little longer, there's no need for it to end too quickly. The plot was important, but what supported his will to survive wasn't simply completing tasks, it was the chance to experience the brightness of life that he could eventually witness. Fourth floor, inside the armed detective agency. Both official members and unofficial interns arrived for work an hour early. The reason was that President Fukuzawa had informed them the previous day that a special client seeking assistance would be coming today, and there was a good chance they might arrive ahead of time. Moreover, President Fukuzawa wanted the members to witness this particular case, explaining that even Ranpo, the agency's strategist, couldn't fully see through the client. Even Ranpo-san couldn't see through them. This point alone intrigued the members of the agency. Among them, Fukuzawa Yukichi's disciple, Kunikida Dalpo, was particularly annoyed as today's disruption interfered with his schedule. He continuously wrote new itinerary updates in his notebook. Noticing Ranpo-san's actions, Kunikida Dalpo remarked in surprise, "It's rare to see Ranpo-san this happy. It's 2 boys, and they're coming up the stairs." Clerk Haruno Kirako glanced out the window and immediately brought over 2 cups of tea, preparing to welcome the clients. Next to them, in the perpetually unoccupied chair, Tayama Katai, wrapped in a blanket, opened his bleary, sleep-deprived eyes and muttered, "Why do I have to show up too? It's the president's orders." Kunikida Dalpo answered silently in his heart, still filled with surprise. Katai was an internet intelligence expert who almost never left his home. If he could avoid going out, he would, and the number of times he had come to the office building could be counted on one hand. Putting his notebook into his bag, the blonde Kunikida Dalpo sat upright, waiting for the arrivals. What kind of people will they be? Knock, knock. The door was politely knocked twice, and from outside came a pleasant, smiling voice of a young man. "Excuse me, is this the armed detective agency? Come in." Edogawa Ranpo, having returned from the window, put on his detective hat and took out his glasses from his pocket. His attitude left no doubt that he was ready to take this case seriously. 2 intersecting fates from different worlds were about to undergo new changes, pointing toward a strange direction. As Dr. Yosano stepped out from the agency's infirmary, she leaned against the doorframe, one hand on her hip, exuding the aura of a powerful 17-year-old girl. She yawned with her gloved right hand and asked, "Who needs my treatment? I'm struggling to wake up this early for work." The way she said this sounded more like she was asking, "Who wants to come here and die?" The few members present in the office suddenly looked toward her, cold sweat trickling down. All at once, they pointed toward the quiet Yakimaru. Him. Unlike the time when she first joined the armed detective agency, mentally exhausted from her military service, Yosano Akiko was no longer bound by the army's control and no longer needed to treat wounded soldiers for the country. She had fully adapted to her new work environment, and her true nature was now on display, evidenced by the large cleaver prominently placed in the infirmary. She assessed the treatment subject with great interest, suddenly widening her eyes. Prosthetics? The agency's doctor had discovered an issue with Yakimaru. 20 minutes earlier, Tezuka Osamu and Yakimaru were seated in the lobby. Facing Edogawa Ranpo's unblinking gaze, Tezuka Osamu, without flinching, concocted a story. "Yakimaru and I come from a poor background. We don't have the financial resources to go to a big hospital. We heard your agency has a skilled doctor, so we decided to entrust you with Yakimaru's treatment. The person beside me has serious physical problems." Clerk Haruno Kirako, seated across from them and taking notes, looked over at Yakimaru after hearing this. On the surface, Yakimaru didn't appear to have any issues, though his body was wrapped in an excessive amount of bandages, suggesting the possibility of external injuries. She didn't speculate further and performed her duty by asking, "May I ask which aspect of the body the problem pertains to?" Tezuka Osamu's expression turned serious as he replied, "Missing body parts." Haruno Kirako nodded and recorded the information. Seated beside her, Edogawa Ranpo couldn't sit still and leaned in close to Yakimaru's mask, ignoring Tezuka Osamu's subtle warnings. His green eyes blinked as he simply and objectively remarked, "No matter how many times I look, it still feels really terrifying." Speaking in a way none of the other members could understand, he pulled out his crude snack and placed it in front of Yakimaru. "Want to eat?" Yakimaru didn't respond at all to the outside world, until Edogawa Ranpo tore open the packaging and placed a cookie in Yakimaru's palm, as if sharing it with a little companion. "You didn't have breakfast, did you? These are really delicious cookies, crispy. The president bought them for me. Ranpo-sama is being very generous, sharing half with you." This scene stunned Kunikida Dalpo, as Ranpo was usually very protective of his food. Relying on his common sense, Kunikida quickly intervened, saying, "Wait a minute. Ranpo-san, typically those who are injured and seek treatment from Dr. Yosano need a physical examination. It's better to keep an empty stomach in the morning." Edogawa Ranpo turned his head and replied, "No need for that. This bandage-covered guy will tell us everything." Tezuka Osamu, taking a moment, playfully remarked to Edogawa Ranpo, "Why is it that you call me bandage guy when he clearly wears more bandages?" Edogawa Ranpo, satisfied with the nickname, cheerfully said, "Idiot, of course, it's because he wraps himself in bandages to protect his easily injured muscle layers, while you wear them because..." For the first time, being called an idiot made Tezuka Osamu's eyelid twitch, and he quickly interrupted. "Detective-san, please respect the client." "Humph." Edogawa Ranpo let out a huff, then ignored the suicidal man and focused all his attention on coaxing Yakimaru. Under the temptation of food, Yakimaru took the cookie in front of him and stared blankly at it. He pinched the cookie between his fingers, causing some crumbs to fall, before finally using his intuition and experience to understand what the food was for. Thanks to Edogawa Ranpo's guidance, Fukuzawa Yukichi deliberately chose not to appear, allowing Yakimaru to feel surrounded by harmless life flames and be more willing to accept their kindness. Just as Yakimaru was about to remove his mask to eat, Tezuka Osamu leaned over during his conversation with the clerk, let out a playful, "Ah," and ate the rugged-looking cookie meant for Yakimaru. Edogawa Ranpo. As Tezuka Osamu chewed, he casually commented, "This type of cookie is easy to choke on. It's not safe to eat." Edogawa Ranpo slammed the table and argued, "Not at all. You're lying. I've never choked on it even once. If you chew it properly, you can swallow it just fine." Tezuka Osamu then grabbed Yakimaru's hand, which Ranpo had touched, and blew off the crumbs. Yakimaru probably prefers something he can just swallow. Edogawa Ranpo deflated at that remark. Tezuka Osamu's statement was true, implying that Yakimaru had even lost the ability to savor good food. Wait a minute. Edogawa Ranpo suddenly remembered his own ability. Quickly, he put on the glasses the president had given him. "Let the great detective reveal all, my ability, super deduction." This sudden declaration of his ability's name startled Tezuka Osamu, and the others were equally surprised, not understanding why Ranpo-san was being so proactive today. "So that's how it is, I understand now," Edogawa Ranpo calmly stated with half-closed eyes. Tezuka Osamu found it difficult to laugh. This ability was too much of a cheat. Was Ranpo really going to use it to detect Yakimaru's past? Even Tezuka himself hadn't been able to uncover that much information. The 165-centimeter-tall famed detective stood up, his hat shading his tousled hair. His green eyes reflected the similarly tall young man before him. Unable to resist, he bent down and ruffled Yakimaru's hair, saying, "You've done well, better than anyone. Ranpo-sama sees it clearly. Your strong will to survive." In the fragile realm of humanity, what surrounded them was a soul that refused to yield. Thus, even if trapped in hell, it would still crawl back to the human world to catch a glimpse of the heavens above. Afterward, Edogawa Ranpo turned to Haruno Kirako, who served as both the receptionist and the agency's secretary, and said, "No need to ask further. Just go inform Dr. Yosano directly." Ranpo-san, his eyes? Kunikida Dalpo suddenly noticed something. Yakimaru hadn't blinked the entire time. Fools. Idiots. Edogawa Ranpo was visibly displeased with their slow reactions. "You still haven't realized he's wearing a full-face prosthetic, have you? Behind his mask, he has no facial features. His limbs are all prosthetics." What kind of horrifying information was this? And it was caused after birth, not something he was born without. Edogawa Ranpo turned to face Dazai Osamu, revealing the truth that overturned previous assumptions from their diagnostic tools. After he was born, many of his body parts were taken: his skin, ears, eyes, nose, tongue, sense of touch, and limbs. All of these were deliberately targeted, full of malice. The ultimate goal was to disassemble his body and kill him. Dazai Osamu, deep in thought, asked only one question: can he be treated? Edogawa Ranpo hesitated. As a detective, he based his conclusions on reality, not empty speculation. Under Yakimaru's gaze, which seemed to sense something, Ranpo looked back. There was no pity, no fear, only the detached observation one might have when looking through a glass display case at a tragic story written out in words. And these words, which formed the person before him, were so full of holes that only a single thread of consciousness clung tightly to the world. Pushing his glasses up his nose, his green eyes closed, reverting to his usual half-lidded expression. If his healthy body was born into this world, the body parts he lost after birth can be treated. Even though he called himself a genius, after confidently assuring the president to invite the necessary person, Ranpo couldn't help feeling a twinge of doubt. No, Ranpo-sama never doubts. There has to be a chance. The key was, the cause of Yakimaru's physical disabilities must lie within the bounds of common sense. With the president absent, Tayama Katai was lazily doing his own thing. As he drifted off to sleep, he was suddenly startled awake by the sound of the guest room door being opened. He sat up in shock, yelling, "Is there an enemy?" Kunikita Dalpo, exasperated, replied, "No, there isn't." His expression didn't look great, as he went off to inform Dr. Yosano. Meanwhile, Haruno Kirako covered her mouth, her composure shaken, and quickly left the office, saying, "I'll go report to the president." The armed detective agency was about to face the task of saving a person, someone with terrifyingly severe disabilities. Chapter 14 End.